I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I would like to invite Mr. Robert Metz, President and leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario.
Thank you once again for allowing me this opportunity to address a very important issue and hopefully in the process to ruffle the feathers of a few politicians. I'm here today to address basically two basic assumptions underlying the government's document here called Setting the Stage, Child Care Reform. If there are four good reasons to keep government away from the provision of daycare, the four principles purportedly guiding this consultation paper are probably among the best: quality, affordability, accessibility, and sound management. To suggest that government can possibly operate on any of these principles is nothing short of absurd. Yet that is the belief, the doctrine that we are expected to share, and I quote from page 1 of that document. We believe that the best way to use public funds to improve the quality of child care is to direct them to publicly accountable, non-profit services. Child care, like health care and education, is simply too important to be left to the influence of market forces. Sounds a bit like a Karl Marx primer to me. I simply do not share this belief. I believe it to be false. On economic grounds, on moral grounds, on the basis of overwhelming evidence, and on plain common sense. To suggest that we should turn our daycare system into the same unsupportable monolithic monsters that our health and education systems are turning into is almost laughable. If you've been watching the trends, you should know that the current public pressure is for more market forces to come into play, including choice, competition, and accountability to consumers themselves, not to governments or to the public. You should also know that universality and the non-profit motive or approach are failing and constantly need to be propped up by continued tax increases, deficits, and service cutbacks. The first major issue we're talking about here is universality. If a precondition of this government's direction with respect to daycare in Ontario is, as outlined on page 7 of Setting the Stage, quote, to create a universally accessible system, end quote, it becomes rather obvious that any argument or suggestion I may present here that universality be abandoned will likely not even be seriously considered. It seems that the only time politicians consider abandoning universality is when their universal giveaway schemes invariably run their due course to bankruptcy. Perhaps I may be able to persuade some in this room today to stop just for a moment and consider how utterly stupid, dishonest, wasteful, and tragic our political commitment to universality is. Universality is certainly no friend of those in need. In fact, under universality, we all lose. As tax-paying citizens, we get a myriad of social programs forced upon us, supposedly to help those in need, or some other variant of an argument that is calculated to appeal to our natural desire to help others, or to insure ourselves against unexpected misfortune. You know, we call this thing the safety net. Then before you know it, it's not a safety net we're getting, but a completely unnecessary and wasteful universal government program. Not just for those with a demonstrable need, but for everybody. How on earth can anyone who is even the slightest caring for those in need possibly justify their support of universality? How can we possibly expect to help those in need when we commit ourselves to squandering billions on providing free government services for all? Who's holding up the safety net if everybody's caught inside it? It's regrettable but true. Under universality, the needy get pushed out by the greedy, who unfortunately include politicians of all parties who use universality arguments to buy votes. Then there's the non-profit motive. Most people are used to hearing about the profit motive, and most people are taught from a very early age to associate the profit motive with greed, selfishness, and a host of other, quote, socially undesirable human traits. That's probably why the non-profit argument politically sells so well. But as a motive, nonprofit is strictly a simplistic political motive, possibly among the most greedy of all. To the consumer, the issue of profit is irrelevant. What matters is price versus quality received. This is true regardless of the nature of the service or product, and certainly includes daycare and healthcare and education, contrary to the assertions made in setting the stage. One of the main reasons socialists in particular hate the profit motive is because profit is a check against unrestrained and unnecessary growth which can undermine the future viability of a business or service. It's easy to see how any activity operating on the profit motive would never, as suggested in setting the stage, pay for, quote, child care center supervisors, administrators, or specialists trained in management and administration, or staff who is overqualified and or overpaid for the value of service needed or wanted by the consumer. As a consumer, I would much rather pay $400 a month to a private daycare that could make a 20% profit than pay $500 or more a month through hidden taxes to a government monopolized daycare system that is operating on a non-profit system. Indeed, the term non-profit is most misleading as a political appeal, and I might even venture to suggest it is almost fraudulent when used in conjunction with arguments of saving costs. It is a fact of existence that the viability of any given service or social activity depends on the fact that you have to take in more money than you spend. I represent a non-profit, officially registered political party that I can assure you would not survive unless we raised more money than we spent. In the case of non-profit, any excess money raised over that expended is simply called a surplus instead of a profit, whereas any shortage between the amount raised and that expended is referred to as a deficit instead of a loss. The only meaningful difference between the two concepts is that profits and losses are subject to our tax system, whereas surpluses and deficits are not subject to tax. This makes the concept of non-profit look even more ridiculous even from the government's point of view. Businesses who manage to earn a profit pay taxes instead of being reliant on them, while businesses who are operating at a loss must absorb that loss themselves rather than force a taxpayer to subsidize a losing effort. Either way, the burden is off the taxpayer and the government. Profit is just one of the many economic terms used to describe any situation where the results of one's effort produce more than is necessary for subsistence and so that you can plan for the future. In conclusion, I have three basic recommendations that if I were sitting where you're sitting today, I would follow. Forget universality. That's my first one. Concentrate efforts on helping those in need. Number two, encourage diversity through competition in a free market, not through regulation and monopoly. And of course, something I've always advocated in every social service, from education to welfare to health care, is direct assistance to those who need it. Do not, please do not make a system universal if you're as good as putting the lid on the coffin before you're off the ground. Let's see to it that the children of today will not be forced to bear the costs of these great daycare programs we're thinking up for them today when they get to be our age. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Metz. Are there any questions? Mr. Wininger?
Yeah, just one, Rob. You know I can never resist an argument with you.
No, you couldn't, David. I came here just for you.
I detected that you may have had a change in your position regarding government subsidies for such services as daycare, because in the past you've always indicated that you didn't approve of government subsidies to agencies, whether they're for-profit or not-for-profit.
Well, I don't approve of them.
No.
I just say that in the issue of choosing on how you're going to run, see, I'm coming into a forum where it's already a given that this is going on. But if I were talking one-on-one to anyone, I could give you 100 reasons why I don't think government should be getting involved in anything. Government should be the agency of last resort, not the first.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.